please don't sue me. I don't have any money. Alright, let me just cut to the chase. It's been quite a few months, almost a year now. I've been on and off for making videos about niche shows and movies that I've always wanted to talk about with people, but never got the chance to bring it up in real life. Either because I can't find anyone interested in some of the things I like, or I'm just naturally brain dead when it comes to socializing with people. I'm leaning towards the latter. Although, my time here on YouTube hasn't been 100% smooth. Looking back at some of my first few videos, I admittedly could have been sharper with my video editing. But regardless, I'm happy that people like my content and want to see more from me. Thank you. And sorry for the wait. Life's been pretty busy. I've currently been immersing myself in one very special show of mine. A show so special I can't stop talking about it on my channel. I keep telling my college buddies, family, anyone I could find. I try to get them to watch this with me, but they think I'm going crazy. And I can't blame them. This anime is just so hard for many of us star-spangled Americans to watch. People got priorities these days, man. They don't want to sit around on the couch and watch excellence brimming from their 4K LCD plasma Sony OLED 32K carat TV. These are busy times, man. Ain't nobody got time to get invested in some old weird show about a man who looks like Curious George. Yeah, it's better to just rewatch The Office for the millionth time. I know you might want to, but wait just a sec. Check out my nice gaming monitor. I got it all hooked up. Oh yeah, I can't wait to play some nice COD. I'll watch anything on here. Play any game, watch any show you want. This thing's off the charts with how epic it is. Oh, look at those curves, man. You guys are missing out on this. This is a beautiful experience you'd feel nostalgic for, even if you've never seen it before. If you guys are jealous, I can get you those affiliate links in the description, no problem. Here's my sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. I'll give out some free advertising for these guys. They didn't really pay me, but I'm giving them free publicity, so while they'll thank me later after everyone watching this video checks them out, they'll gain a huge following thanks to me, you know. Also, since we're here, I may as well tell you about my other sponsor, Capri Sun. Capri Sun, man, you should drink it. Although if you're not too careful, you might pee your pants. But I'll just stop wasting your time, because let's face it, CRT monitors are pretty outdated, and a lot of people look at Lupin III in the same light. His show has gone old, stale. No one watches him anymore. Not in America. Sure, you've probably seen him pop up on television over the years, maybe on Adult Swim, and yeah, he had a pretty nice CGI film. That'll definitely generate some nice interest in our Phantom Thief here. But will it though? Compared to our other anime boys over here, Lupin's just, outdated? I guess that's just how people feel about the guy. He's been around for 50 years, but maybe his charm's diminished. There's that, and people also just don't know who this guy is in the first place, or have any ways to get into his franchise. The same franchise that inspired so many other things that they may already like. I mean, when you look at the many shows for Lupin that have come out, there's so many different parts. People seem to think that they have to watch part 1 first, and that came out decades ago. And once they see the old animation and they probably don't like it, they'll probably look to the movies and specials for Lupin. Perhaps they want to watch one thing of Lupin that helps sum up the entire character rather than wasting their time watching any of the show, because they don't have the time to watch the episodes. But even that is overwhelming, because there's 50 plus specials, movies, OVAs, so then they either just give up or never get into the series. Or, a small percentage of people could pick up the Phantom Thief's appeal, and stay hooked on the show like I have. I mean, I'm not trying to make myself out to be some, like, cultist, some awesome person who's into this cool show that no one else has ever heard of. It's just, like, my opinion, and something that I love to watch, and I understand if people don't like to watch Lupin III, but I do think a lot of people don't even know much about Lupin III, and if they did know a lot about this show, then they could come to appreciate more modern shows that have come out in recent times, and yeah, and even some of the things that they currently like right now, because I can bet that a lot of shows and movies that you've gotten into, like, you know, besides James Bond, like Ocean's 11, or The Italian Job, or random picaresque, you know, thieving, conniving, criminal-minded people, you know, you may like that stuff, but you may not realize that Lupin III was actually what started that whole trend, or at least what got it popular back in the 60s. My Lupin videos seem to have allured many to watch my channel. Oh yeah, I've got some banger views, and a cool kick-ass following to boot. Man, life is great. I'm so thankful and appreciative you guys are watching my videos. We're going to talk about Lupin III once again, but this time, I'm doing something a little different. I'm going all out. I'm not holding back. I can't, I refuse, I won't give up. I will show you my full power. I'm not just making one Lupin video, no. I'm making 2. Actually, scratch that. Scratch it hard. I'm not making 3 videos. I'm not making 4 videos. No, I'm making 6 videos.
Another one.
6 videos. 6 full-length analysis episodes that cover the entirety of Lupin the Third, or all you need to know about the franchise. I'll be talking about each and every part of the show, and I'll explain how each of them fit into the Lupin mythos, in a digestible, heartwarming manner. I'll even talk about the other darker, egregiously violent epic spin-off series, and all its beautiful raunchy gore and mature overtones, all the ups and turns, significant and wondrous features when it comes to the voice acting, music, visuals, movies, TV specials, manga, live-action films, video games. Yeah, you heard me, we're going all in. By the end of this marathon, I will succeed in building a new fan cult for this guy, bigger than the one that exists right now. He is the next coming. This man, this monkey man, will be the next man to be worshipped. I'm talking missionary. I'm talking super... Wow, this is a real word. I don't know why I'm saying all these things. But look, you've probably heard of Lupin the Third. He's not that unheard of. From a viral AMV video to perhaps a funny compilation of wacky moments in the anime, these are the things that remain popular for a Phantom Thief on the YouTube platform. To this day, I have not seen a video that discusses each different show individually, in depth, and goes through all the shows, movies, TV specials that makes this franchise so lovingly enjoyable to watch. What's that? Crunchyroll already did it? Huh. Well, that's fine. In fact, I'm thankful. Now I got something to back me up in case anyone feels the need to call me out at any discrepancies in the information here. It doesn't seem like this video went super in-depth with everything anyways about the Lupin franchise, and that's fine. They covered the major topics of Lupin's history in a nice, concise manner. They still missed out on all the other extraneous details that make Lupin so cool, but no worries, that's where I come in. If we're going to talk about Lupin the Third, we've got to go through everything. It's the only way I can fully demonstrate the strong appeal this show has over my heart. Join me as we embark on an epic adventure through a timeless classic that's largely unheard of in America. This will be the very first part of this 6-video journey we're all going to go on together. And if you like what you see in any of these videos, please support the main distributors of this anime. I'll have links for both the Crunchyroll and the official streaming platform that owns this series, TMS Anime. But let's get ready. In a world filled with anime characters and adult humor that hasn't aged well. Oh man, what is he doing? Meet the epic, wholesome, badass ragtag group of thieves, with the leader who's a charming, smarmy, picaresque Japanese James Bond that would put Nathan Drake to massive shame.
Hey! Jackass, you're ruining the show here.
A cooler, smooth, jazzy kind of guy. Someone more realistic than anything you've ever seen in a shonen anime. Or any anime. Oh yeah, look at him go. I present to you, Lupin the Third, Part 1. Also known as the Green Jacket series. So as I said before, we'll be going through every single show, movie, TV special that I can get my hands on that kind of fits in this almost non-existent but viewable timeline that a lot of the writers really haven't adhered to over the past 50 years. And that's due to the fact that Lupin the Third shows and movies are often self-contained and not really serialized, so to speak. Most of the time it's kind of hard to tell when some of the stuff takes place, given the lack of continuity that's properly discussed in some of these episodes or movies. But one way you can tell that Lupin the Third takes place in a certain era is based off of the suit jacket or blazer that he's wearing. So for example, in Lupin the Third Part 1, the show we're going to be talking about today, he wears a green blazer. I don't really have a blazer, but it's a nice green. Yeah. There's green jacket, there's red jacket, pink jacket, blue jacket, also green jacket. Well, we'll talk about that later. Also, this isn't necessarily a factual video by nature. I may allow some of my opinions and biases to kind of creep in, but I'll try to keep that at a minimum. Expect mid to light spoilers. I'm not gonna destroy the viewing experience for some of these movies and TV shows and episodes and etc. But I will at least try to explain Lupin the Third the best way I can. Regardless, you will know everything you would ever want to know about Lupin the Third by the time that we're done with all these 6 videos. I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you enjoy. And you don't have to subscribe if you want, but if you want to, that'd be kind of cool. Also, this is probably a good time to say this. Some of the humor and content from Lupin the Third is tailored for adults. You can easily tell because he's got hair on his arms. Yeah, I'm a pretty hairy guy. I like to thank my Indian heritage for that. And I guess, that has allowed me to ultimately become more connected to Lupin the Third. He's got so much hair on his arms. There are scenes in this show that definitely may alienate some viewers. So if you aren't an adult, I don't know. I guess you should be careful before watching. Personally, though, I had no problems watching many of these movies when I was a kid. Or even some of the anime episodes. There are many child-friendly movies, specials, anime episodes, that have come out over the years for the franchise, and that ultimately became the main selling point for the show back in Japan when this franchise got really popular. So don't worry, there's nothing scary or even that violent. If you're watching this video and you know next to nothing about Lupin the Third, don't worry. I'll go through the basics first, and then from there we'll move on. One more thing. It's about his name. It looks like it should be pronounced Lupin, right? Well, the reason I pronounce the name as Lupin comes down to two things: the Japanese voice work, and more importantly, the character's origins. It's no secret that localization hasn't been consistent with this franchise. These past 50 whopping years of Lupin the Third has resulted in various translators, distributors, and localizers in each region of the world handling this property. If you thought Dragon Ball Z was messed up, Lupin's franchise was even older, so it definitely has its fair share of dubbing problems. However, in retrospect, DBZ probably suffered a bit more.
Oh, Goku! Oh.
It doesn't help that the name Lupin was inspired by the French thief who came before him, Arsène Lupin, who was created by novelist Maurice Leblanc. But see, actually, this does help explain how our Phantom Thief's name should be correctly pronounced. Japanese syllables and sounds are often different from what we're used to in Latin-based languages. I'm not French, but the original thief who predates our Japanese friend here has his name pronounced as Arsène Lupin.
Arsène Lupin.
I guess you could equate this to the Polish-French composer, Frédéric Chopin, with that strong nasal N sound at the end. I'm not good at pronouncing the names, sorry, I'm not French. Hopefully you get the picture though. So if we were to Romanize what his name sounds like in Japanese, we would have to take out the L and pronounce the name as Lupin. L, phonetically speaking, doesn't exist in the Japanese language. Therefore, his grandson would also be called Lupin in Japan, or his full title, Lupin Sansei, which translates as Lupin the Third. Because the name was pronounced as Lupin in Japan, that allowed him to avoid copyright issues since the original name, Lupin, troubled the owners of Leblanc's estate back in France. But Lupin brought over a loophole. You see, Lupin is definitely a different name, as there's no longer an L at the beginning of the word. And that granted the creator of this character, Monkey Punch, full right to keep using it for this franchise. Over the years, Lupin's had all sorts of names to get away from copyright troubles, like Wolf, Cliff. Even Lupin was used in America to help get away from legal issues, or just the pronunciation, Lupin. But try not to get confused with Remus Lupin from Harry Potter. If you are, that's okay. I was too at one point, but I know better nowadays. The correct pronunciation that's used today and what's faithful to the character's legacy is Lupin. I'll be pronouncing it that way, or just actually the subtle lazy American version, Lupin. And if we're talking about Japanese, like I said before, they would call him Lupin. After 70 years had passed from Leblanc's original copyright, which was back in 2012, Lupin's real name, his actual name with an L, could be used globally, allowing for the copyright struggles that plagued the salute for so many years to finally end. With that out of the way, let's get the show on the road. It's no secret that Lupin the Third is very popular in Italy, France, and of course, Japan. We'll get into more of the why side of things later, but thanks to Lupin's origins already having French roots, it was almost a given he would garner a French audience eventually. Arsène Lupin was basically France's answer to Sherlock Holmes. Hell, they even had a crossover at one point, and ironically enough, Leblanc himself got into a copyright dispute with Sherlock's creator, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, since he himself didn't ask for permission when using the character in his crossover he wanted to make. Funny coincidence, I guess Monkey Punch isn't the only one to do this. Although, to be fair, Monkey Punch has stated that using the same character design, behavior, and face would be illegal, but using a name alone for a completely different character wouldn't be illegal at all. I keep mentioning Monkey Punch this, Monkey Punch that. I'm not talking about DK's moves in Punch-Out, although Donkey Kong is technically a gorilla. Just who is Monkey Punch? Well, he's the Japanese man who first conceptualized Lupin the Third, the man who created our Phantom Thief and all his pals and villains in the manga. His name is Kazuhiko Kato, and he took on the pen name Monkey Punch to publish his manga under the company Futabasha. He read the Japanese translation of Maurice Leblanc's novels when he was a kid in school, and loved the tales of Arsène Lupin. He merged those roots with the most popular movie franchise at that point in time, James Bond. Combining those two fictional giants together led to the creation of the rogue, scoundrel, womanizer thief that people still talk about 50 years later. August 10th, 1967 was when we saw the first outing of Lupin in his very own manga. The character in his first iteration ever sported a sparkling red jacket, something Kato-san regarded as a flashy, sexy color. Not gonna lie, it does look pretty sleek. This, however, does not mean the manga fits in with any specific anime part. Remember how I said earlier the color on Lupin's jacket can help determine what anime series we're talking about? Well, the red blazer he's wearing here would lead one to assume that this is related to Part 2, the series where Lupin prominently wears a red jacket. However, unlike the carefree and wacky adventures Lupin III has in that show, in the manga, things are a bit grim. Therefore, these two are not the same and exist in their own universe. Nudity, excessive violence, dark humor. Eesh. Yeah, Monkey Punch was definitely not pulling any punches here. It's here we get to have a proper introduction to our main characters, similar to how manga nowadays has those kind of character splash pages at the very beginning of the volume. Lupin III, as I stated previously, is the descendant of the infamous thief Arsène Lupin, and is the world's most wanted gentleman thief. He steals anything he wants, and has a fondness for using gadgets to help him escape from the authorities, as well as help him steal in general. Besides whatever gadgets he chooses to use in his adventures, he always carries around his trademark Walther P38 pistol, as well as a pack of cigarettes for a good smoke. He likes to leave calling cards for his victims, letting them know he'll steal from them in advance. Despite helping them and local authorities anticipate his movements, they still usually fail to stop Lupin's plans. His other pals include Goemon Nishikawa, Jigen Daisuke, and Fujiko Mine. Jigen Daisuke, or in the West they'd refer to him as Daisuke Jigen, is Lupin's right-hand man, and is the most faithful character to Lupin out of his entire gang. When making this character, Monkey Punch was inspired by the late actor James Coburn, most notably his gunslinger character in The Magnificent Seven. He's a master marksman, capable of wielding all kinds of artillery. He usually has a Smith & Wesson Model 19 revolver chambered in a 37 Magnum. He's a pretty laid-back guy, and the only real issue he has with Lupin is his affections for women. Again, Jigen is very loyal to Lupin, they're good friends outside of their missions, but Jigen really dislikes how Lupin's attraction over women can easily sidetrack them from ever succeeding in their criminal endeavors. Goemon Nishikawa, the samurai guy here, is very similar to Lupin in some ways. He's also a descendant of a legendary figure, and he's formerly known as Goemon Nishikawa, the 13th. His ancestor, who goes by the same name minus the whole 13th, was a real-life famous 16th century thief. This guy was pretty much Japanese Robin Hood. His personality was modeled after Soshi Okita, a skilled 19th century samurai. He can get pretty rivalrous with Lupin, but otherwise they're good partners and help each other from time to time. He wields a powerful Zantetsu sword that, at some points, kinda gives him an unfair advantage over the plethora of enemies he faces. He's kinda like Piccolo, I guess. He's a foil towards the main protagonist. Unlike Piccolo, however, he's insanely OP when it comes to fighting, as he's well versed in Kenjutsu, Karate, Jujutsu, and Iaido. In layman's terms, he's a badass with a sword. He struggles having connections with other people given how quiet and reserved he can get, and doesn't understand technology at all. And not so much like a boomer, kind of actually. I'll show you what I mean later on. And finally, the last member of Lupin's gang is Fujiko Mine. She's also a bit rivalrous with Lupin, and straight up betrays the gang several times throughout the shows. She's a bit mysterious, and mostly operates alone. Evidently, she becomes an object of lust in pretty much every single iteration of Lupin. Lupin's infatuation with her allows Fujiko to take advantage of him several times, something Jigen doesn't really like, and she usually only joins up with him in the first place to steal for her own convenience, so she can get pretty selfish at times. But she does have a soft spot for Lupin, and isn't always super selfish. And despite using her looks to have her way in life, there are times when she can actually have a good heart. It just isn't too often. Monkey Punch's intentions with this character was to have Fujiko Mine be the name of every single guest female in every chapter, so it would be a different woman but with the same name, Fujiko. Kind of odd, but he later dropped this idea and just stuck with one character design and one person. He probably took inspiration from the James Bond films, with the ever-changing cast of actresses that appeared in those films. So Fujiko Mine basically is the femme fatale of the group. Monkey Punch also admitted that when it comes to Lupin and Fujiko's relationship, the best way he could describe it was, Not necessarily lovers, not necessarily husband and wife, but more just having fun as a man and woman with each other. The last character I'll talk about here is Lupin's main antagonist, the one person everyone else tries to get away from, the one man who can land them all in jail, Inspector Zenigata. He's a fictional Japanese detective who has a personality drawn from Tom and Jerry, where basically he's Tom and Lupin's Jerry, getting chased as he makes off with stealing from someone. Jerry can also be Jigen or Goemon or Fujiko too, depending on the story we're talking about. But Lupin is Zenigata's main target. He was tasked with finding and arresting this thief by the company he works for, known as ICPO, or Interpol, which stands for the International Criminal Police Organization. It's not really like how Interpol is in the real world. Interpol in real life is more like an information sharing network on criminals and their crimes. Similar to how Tom always fails in eating Jerry, yeah, Zenigata slips up a lot in catching Lupin. He's presented in a comical way since he usually fails in capturing Lupin. So these 5 characters appear in nearly every single Lupin related show, movie, special, and have done just that for the past 50 years. Their abilities have remained consistent, with their origin stories receiving slight tweaks to either better fit the times, or perhaps writers at the helm felt it would be more appropriate to retcon some of the traits about these guys in earlier parts. But honestly, they've largely remained the same, and still retain their relationships towards Lupin that were first outlined here in the manga. Many of the stories in these manga volumes were later adapted for future anime episodes, but toned down because of the relentless gore and sexual violence. Lupin demonstrates some of his more rapey vibes with how infatuated he is with women. Yeah, I'll go more into this later, but man. Yeah, I'm gonna censor some of this stuff, not because I'm monetized in any way for making this video, I'm just doing it out of decency. The overall artwork and attention to detail with the many character designs drawn here are rather good, and there are some funny gags here that I recognize would later spiral into the many anime shows that came after. It's just that some of the art here isn't particularly pleasing to see. If you want to read some of this stuff, I'll put a link in the description for the manga that I used to put in this video. You can check it out online for free. The art is pretty nice, even by today's standards. Even though it came out in the 60s, I'm impressed by Monkey Punch's artistry. However, like I said, some of the material has not aged well, at least for me. Still a nice read to check out, but just be warned there are some, After the success of the manga, in 1969, Tokyo Movie, or as they're known today, TMS Entertainment, produced something called Lupin III Pilot Film. It mainly serves as an animated introduction to the 5 major characters, as well as someone else. He's a heavily obscure character from the manga, and he doesn't really show up ever again. He's a retired detective who goes by Kokoro Akechi. He tries to help Zenigata arrest Lupin. Each character is introduced to the viewer through several vignettes with narration. In this short 12-minute film, we get to see Lupin III, Jigen, and Fujiko meet in a mansion surrounded by police led by Inspector Zenigata and Akechi. Goemon Ishikawa, who's not pals with Lupin in this film, offers to help the police take him down by killing him with his katana. Yeah, these guys clearly aren't friends in this iteration. Damn, Jigen's not afraid to throw hands with the police. He fit perfectly in GTA. However, unbeknownst to the authorities and Goemon, Lupin has already exited the building in disguise as Akechi, and helps Jigen and Fujiko escape too. I know I just spoiled the entire pilot film. I honestly don't think anyone would really want to check this out, especially when compared to some of the movies and shows that have much better animation and better introductions to the characters. This project had few financial backers, partly because of the violence and mature themes. It's only a 12-minute short, yet it's clear where the controversy picks up. Ugh. As far as the USA version of this film goes, there was actually no such thing. No official dub was out, not to my knowledge, but there probably wasn't any incentive to make one in the first place. This film was more for Japan. It was a test to see if they could strike success with Japanese viewers, just like the manga did. If the pilot film was successful, they would then proceed to make more animated movies in a similar vein to James Bond films. However, instead of films, TMS decided to make a cartoon show, but not for kids. They set out to make the very first anime show that would ever be geared for specifically adults. Lupin III Part 1, also known as the Green Jacket series, was broadcasted from October 24th, 1971 to March 26th, 1972. Just like the pilot film, they adapted directly from the manga and kept all the major 5 characters. However, Lupin here sports a green jacket. This was because the character designer for this anime, Yasuo Otsuka, decided Lupin should wear something different to help differentiate between the cartoon series and the manga. So it's just a design quirk, nothing really more to it than that. The opening for this anime reused footage from the 1969 pilot film and modified some scenes to show him in the established green jacket. For the Japanese dub, Yasuo Yamada was casted as the voice actor for Lupin, and he would go on to later voice act the character for the next 20 years, all the way into the 90s. He was famous in Japan for doing the dubbing of Clint Eastwood in the Japanese releases of The Good, Bad, and Ugly. A few key episodes I want to talk about help better explain what Part 1 was trying to achieve. What vision the director Masaki Osumi envisioned for the characters. He wanted to remain faithful to the darker tone of the manga and had no intention of holding back. I won't exactly spoil any specific episodes, not fully, but I think they're worth going over. At least part of the plot. In the very first episode of this anime, Osumi-san made a loose adaptation of chapter 56 in the Lupin manga, titled Dead Heat. Lupin is seen racing for a prize on the Hida Speedway. Unfortunately for him, the race is an elaborate trap designed by the Scorpion Gang. They want to kill him and eliminate the rest of the criminal competition when it comes to stealing things. And the Scorpion Gang is holding Fujiko hostage. Oh, kinda random, but in the 1987 Italian redub of this episode, nearly all the torture scenes with Fujiko were removed. Episode 2 is about this magician named Psychokinetic. Fujiko stole something from him and he wants it back. Because he can shoot flame out of his hands, walk on air, and is impervious to bullets, Lupin and Jigen have a difficult time protecting Fujiko from this guy. Remember this Psychokinetic guy, he'll be pretty important later on in the video. Psychokinetic was a very formidable opponent for Lupin, as he demonstrated himself as an actual threat, unlike Zenigata, who, as the Tom and Jerry analogy goes, never could quite catch Lupin. But in the next 2 episodes, he does just that. In episode 4, Inspector Zenigata successfully drops Lupin in jail, and he gets stuck for a year, awaiting his execution date. Fujiko and Jigen try to break him out, but he actually insists on staying in prison. They figure he'll find a way to break out like he usually does, but here he's actually kinda done. Man, this guy's a real criminal though. He actually killed police officers by hanging them. Lupin in the 60s was more than just a thief. My gosh, he was a serial killer. Episode 5 introduces us to Goemon Ishikawa in the Green Jacket series. Goemon's mentor gives him a mission to find Lupin and use his Zan Tetsuken sword to kill him. But there's more to the plot than either Goemon or Lupin realize. Also, kinda random again, in the 1987 Italian redub, the scene where Fujiko is stripped by Goemon has been cut out. Ugh. Oh man. Episode 7 is another Goemon episode. This episode is special in that it's the first time Hayao Miyazaki was involved with the franchise. He originally went uncredited, but it was later confirmed that he indeed worked on this episode at the request of Otsuka-san. Remember, he's the character designer for the show, in case you forgot. Because of this changeover between directors, and even Isao Takahata got involved with this episode as well, there were many coloring errors and the dialogue wasn't always animated in sync with the voice actors. Miyazaki's work could be seen, however, in the high detail in the vehicles Lupin drove with. As you can see here, he had a Mercedes-Benz SSK chasing after Goemon. Okay, so I know I just said a lot of names, but Isao Takahata and Hayao Miyazaki. If these two sound familiar, well, they're the same two who now make beautiful animated films at Studio Ghibli. Or Ghibli, if we're following the transliteration rules. Because, you know, the L sound doesn't exist for Japanese speakers. These two guys would later take full control for directorial duties from Masaki Osumi. Because you see, well, early ratings for the series were very poor. After the second episode was broadcasted, Osumi-san was told from higher-ups that he needed to make the show ditch the dark tone and make it more kid-friendly. Like I said before, this show was the first animated series in Japan to be targeted for adults, and as such, the creators hoped it would set a precedent for future animated shows down the line. While it did do that 50 years later, at the time it was released, it was not financially successful. Keep in mind that before this, all Japanese cartoons were family friendly, so they were dipping into a bit of unknown territory here, and perhaps biting more than they could chew with the grim and ultra-violent but faithful depiction of Monkey Punch's work. Tokyo Movie requested them to change the show and make it more child-friendly, but Osumi-san refused, and so he stepped down from directing future episodes. Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata were already working with Tokyo Movie on another adaptation, but of an entirely different book, known as P.P. Longstocking. Miyazaki-san and Takahata-san did research, going to Sweden and scouting areas like Visby, but after personally visiting the creator Astrid Lindgren, she denied them permission to continue. These guys would go on to do similar type things for their movies, like with Kiki's Delivery Service being adapted from another medium entirely. But but in more recent times they usually do get permission from the original authors. Anyways, so after getting denied from doing that movie in 1971, Tokyo Movie decided to make these two in charge of Lupin III, but they were forced to make changes by the company to make sure Lupin was more family-friendly, lighthearted, and comical. Unlike Osumi-san, Miyazaki-san, and Takahata-san fully agreed. This would make episode 9, A Hitman Sings the Blues, the last episode Osumi-san would ever work on. Officially. Osumi-san would still work on other episodes like episode 12, Who Had the Last Laugh. But his directorial role would be uncredited for that, and only uncovered years later. The Ghibli duo helped give all the characters a more cheerful and positive outlook. Lupin wouldn't be a dark, non-caring thief / serial killer / fiend who enjoys ripping women's clothes off without their consent. Instead, he would be an upbeat, happy-go-lucky thief who's never afraid to break the law to steal what he wants. Jigen would be a friendly, cheery, but still more quiet and relaxed partner in crime. Fujiko Mine's excessive nudity and sexual appeal was removed altogether, but she would still try and take advantage of men with her charming good looks. It was just extremely toned down. Goemon was also changed, and his confusion with modern societal standards and technology as a whole would clash with his more traditional Japanese life, which would then be played out as a comedic gag. Zenigata would be made much more comical in the whole Tom and Jerry-esque relationship with Lupin, and he would fail in usually capturing Lupin just like before, but now it was even more funnier, and he himself was animated goofier on purpose. These two essentially created the blueprint for what later Lupin III shows / specials would come back to, and thus were able to save the franchise. Ratings were more promising from then on. However, even their attempts couldn't save the show from getting cancelled. There were 26 episodes planned, but only 23 ever got produced, since Tokyo Movie refused to keep having them made. They did keep in mind, however, that the lighter tone was more successful, despite it going against Monkey Punch's wishes. Some of the scripts and other animation material from the canned 3 episodes were later used in the sequel show. The only countries that received dubs for Part 1, though, outside of the Japanese dub, were Italy, Spain, and Brazil. In Brazil, the show had to be called Cliffhanger due to copyright issues at the time with the name Lupin, as I stated earlier. France got a dub as well, so this in a way started to build the roots for Lupin's popularity in Italy and France. America, however, would not get any of these roots, so to speak, since Part 1 never got dubbed in English. There are missing archives of this anime, including the soundtracks and effects used to make some of these episodes. Localizing Part 1 would be extremely unlikely, but not impossible. I guess since there's no true fan demand, at least not to my knowledge, we'll probably never get an English dub. Even if they got the English voice cast together, they would probably have to censor a lot of these scenes to straight up make this a rated R release because of the elephant in the room. Yeah, so I understand that this isn't a 100% factual video. I am letting some of my bias and opinions creep in here, but yeah, I just don't feel comfortable with some of this material. I don't know how else to say this, but I do like a lot of gritty shows and movies. I love Tarantino films. I love the Scorsese kind of gangster films, you know. I like when they get dark and gritty. A lot of people feel disturbed by that kind of stuff and that content, and that's totally fine. But I like that kind of stuff, you know. I like watching that. And I do have limits, though. I do have limits when it comes to watching these kinds of things. I don't really like watching sexual violence or any, like, rape. I think it's a very sensitive topic and it's not really easy to do. But sometimes when I see it in like movies or TV shows, and if they do a good job with it, then I applaud it because it's a pretty good plot device. It can progress the story forward and establish a pretty dark tone. But here in Lupin the Third Part 1, I honestly think they did a terrible job with the sexual violence. The problem is that they actually don't take this whole thing seriously. They just kind of play it off as a gag, like something that Lupin just kind of does out of habit. I'm not trying to be like super triggered or anything about it, like, oh no, this is horrible. I mean, I am pretty triggered about it. I mean, it is kind of horrible. The sexual violence specifically that Monkey Punch originally designed for Lupin the Third in the manga, the pilot film, and the show isn't something that I can just brush off. It really bothers me a lot. Again, the worst thing is they try to play this off as like a gag, like it's supposed to be funny that he's molesting the girls, but it's not funny to me. Even in later versions of Lupin III, he's shown as a ladies' man, but of course, thanks to Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata's involvement, it's played down significantly. But it's still a defining trait for the character. The entire concept of like Lupin trying to be horny or whatever is fine on paper, Brock from Pokemon did the same thing. He would just kind of be horny and try to get into girls, but he wouldn't really touch them in weird ways. I guess by modern standards, it'd be kind of stalkerish and creepy. Definitely creepy, but I mean, he's not molesting anybody. But see, Lupin here has no fear in ripping off the clothes of other women, and it just really disturbs me to see something like this. I know he's a criminal, but it's just distasteful, Lupin is not meant to be a hero. He's not a good person. He made that rogue, picaresque criminal who plays dirty and isn't afraid to defy the law super popular in Japan, and I have no problem admiring characters like that. I love them. But the sexual assault content really hasn't aged well. It's not what I'd like to see. I think there are much better ways to convey how Lupin is a criminal and to test societal standards of what's considered a good lawful citizen. But yeah, that's just a personal gripe that I have. I understand that there is a big cult fan base for this particular style of Lupin, but personally for me, I'm not a big fan of everything that entails. Yeah, I hope I'm not presenting Osumi-san's vision and, by extension, Monkey Punch's vision of Lupin III in these first 9 episodes biased in any way. I mean, it is biased, but I don't want to dissuade you from watching these episodes because they're still really good. I think the animation is stellar for its time, and you can tell the animators poured a lot of hard work and soul into some of these cells. The art looks pretty nice. I would say the animation looks pretty good. It's just for me personally, some of the things that they animated are not to my liking, but that's fine. It was a different time back then, Clearly, I'm not the only person who felt disturbed by some of this content. A lot of people seem to not like it, and that's why they had to change it for a lighter tone. If I had to pick my favorite episode of Part 1, it would have to be the 22nd episode. The first move wins computer operation. It's actually kind of funny and very lighthearted, but a well done episode in my eyes. I won't spoil everything, but as I did for the other episodes, I'll explain the plot. An FBI computer specialist believes he's made the computer capable of predicting Lupin III's crimes, and the machine is able to actually calculate a way to capture him and his crew. Zenigata doesn't believe this is possible and warns him the computer won't work. Lupin in this episode tries to outdo technology, something he thinks he can outrival easily, but him, Jigen, and Goemon have difficulties understanding how computers work, and these difficulties become very clear throughout the episode. I like this episode a lot, but then again, it's just my opinion. It's really funny, and demonstrates the personalities of each of the main characters rather well. To capitalize on the success of Part 1, from both the darker origins and lighter reimagining, but mostly the lighter tone, the very first live-action film for Lupin was made. Lupin III: Strange Psychokinetic Strategy came out on August 3rd, 1974. This was also the first feature film for the entire Lupin franchise, if you don't count the pilot film, but let's be real, that doesn't really count. The official plot for this film sounds kind of funny. The Matron organization is out to get a priceless national treasure, but when they see third-generation cat burglar Lupin as an obstacle, countless assassins are sent to kill him on sight and kidnap his girl Fujiko. Can Lupin get the loot before the Matron gang, rescue Fujiko, and stay alive at the same time? Wait, that's Lupin? That looks nothing like him. He doesn't have a green jacket, that's for sure. More of like a white jacket. But forget that, what happened to Jigen? Yeah, well, clearly we've got different writers here, and a different production company. Instead of Tokyo Movie, Toho both produced and distributed the film. Again, this is the first live-action and first ever movie for the Lupin franchise, and yet, well, it gets the whole thieving aspect of the character right. It's just everything else that's so bizarre. Goemon Ishikawa doesn't even show up here, but I don't mind. He probably didn't even want to be in here. This film takes the lighthearted tone from the end of Part 1 and just kind of plays with it, not really doing anything new or fresh. The only difference between this and the show is that it's live action, with real actors doing crazy things. It tries to live up to the show, but in my opinion, it doesn't really do a good job. It's got fun, energetic gags that keep you engaged throughout the film, but otherwise it's rather strange, hence the title I guess. Nothing really to write home about, but if you're into that sort of thing, somewhat budget Japanese Austin Powers, yeah, then it's a fine watch. Because this was a kiddie film, and they weren't really allowed to show sex, they had a funny way of showing Lupin get in action. Huh, it's a workaround. I guess it worked. But what about the animated movies? Those are what really made Lupin popular. Well, no films came out during the runtime of Lupin the Third Part 1. That just wasn't a thing yet. The sequel series, where Lupin sports a red jacket instead of the green one, was when they started doing annual releases of TV specials and movies for the character. Movies were made less frequently, but featured higher animation quality and better sound. Oh, by the way, the soundtrack for Part 1 was nothing really special in my opinion. It didn't really feature the more popular jazz that made Lupin the Third so distinct over the years. I had a hard time finding the soundtrack for Part 1, but it is out there. I just didn't care for the music. I felt that the music style wavered a bit in what it wanted to be. And again, until Part 2 was made, Lupin never really had a steady foot in what kind of musical style it wanted to represent itself as. The music in Part 1 kinda blended in with other cartoons at the time, but there was a sort of special dark ambience that would be unique to these earlier episodes, compared to the later versions of Lupin, when they abandoned the quietness and more dreary tone Osumi-san incorporated in Part 1. By quietness, I mean they literally wouldn't put music at some points in the episodes, something completely unheard of nowadays in modern cartoons, either for the budget reasons or the style they wanted to present in these episodes. So when it comes to the animated movies, the very first animated film for Lupin the Third, Mystery of Mamo, was actually what I consider a red jacket movie, because it has him in his red jacket, which is from Part 2. So because of that, I won't talk about it in this video. Instead, I will talk about the second animated film that they ever made for Lupin the Third, which happens to be my favorite Lupin the Third film of all time. December 15th, 1979, Lupin the Third, Castle of Cagliostro was released. Miyazaki-san worked more solo this time around. Isao Takahata was busy with a different project. And actually, this is the very first film that Hayao Miyazaki ever directed by himself. He also wrote, designed, and created the storyboard for this film. Again, all by himself. Something that I've messed up repeatedly in my life. Cagliostro is actually pronounced as Cagliostro. However, if I accidentally flip and say Cagliostro instead, my mistake, please forgive me. The only reason I would mispronounce it like that. And the same could be really said for any of the other Japanese names or foreign names that I've said throughout the video. If I ever mispronounced anything in this video, I am deeply sorry. The reason that I want you, the viewer, to understand, and the reason that I guess I could come up with at the top of my head for why I'm mispronouncing and making these silly mistakes, it would have to be for the simple explanation that I am a dirty American. Despite being Miyazaki-san's directorial debut, was one of the very last things he ever contributed to Lupin the Third. He did some work on the sequel series in between 1972 and 1979 when this film was released, but we can talk about that later. Because this film came out when Miyazaki-san was working on the sequel, or the Part 2 series, or better known as the Red Jacket series, arguably some people could say this film fits in more as a Part 2 film. However, because Lupin is wearing his green jacket, it's believed that this is the vision that he strived to illustrate in the last episodes of the Part 1 series when he was working with his other colleague, Isao Takahata. So this would make sense that it fits in canonically in Part 1, not only because of the green blazer, but because of the mannerisms of the characters that are very similar to how they appeared in the Part 1 series. Yeah, I love this film so much. The animation is beautiful, the story is wonderfully crafted under Miyazaki-san's classic approach to filmmaking that he still uses to this very day. The jazz from the then new composer Yuji Ono would continue to work for nearly every single Lupin film and TV special from then on. Not to mention the shows too. He perfectly established what musical style would fit in with Lupin the Third. You know, it'd be only fair if I gave you a brief plot summary of what this film is about. But don't worry, I won't spoil it for you because I really want you guys to watch this. But also I want to be fair because I didn't really spoil any of the other episodes back in Part 1, or I spoiled the pilot film I guess, but yeah, I really want you to watch this, so yeah. The Castle of Cagliostro follows an older and wiser Lupin the Third, along with his accomplice Jigen. And they both rob from a casino, but only to find the money to be counterfeit. He decides to drive to a tiny country known as Cagliostro for some strange reason. Even his partner Jigen doesn't understand what he's doing, but along the way, they both get embroiled in a chase scene and save a runaway princess named Clarice. Lupin investigates more into who she is and what she means to the country of Cagliostro. And this leads to some very interesting revelations that eventually involves his other companions and Inspector Zenigata. You know, I just realized Jigen kinda looks like Miyazaki-san. That's funny. He likes to put himself in the films he works on sometimes, so I dig it. Despite underperforming financially when it first released, it had numerous re-releases that brought more attention to the film, and eventually this film became regarded as one of the greatest anime movies in history. As subjective as that sounds, there were actually many people who were inspired to pursue filmmaking and animation just from this film alone. Castle of Cagliostro set many standards for Lupin that would last for several decades later on. For one thing, Lupin's car. Hayao Miyazaki is infamous for his attention to detail, especially with automobiles. The Mercedes-Benz SSK Lupin drove before is gone, and now he's got a 1957 yellow Fiat 500. Nowadays, this car is practically synonymous with the character. It's super iconic, and every time I think of Lupin, I can't forget about this car. And so can't the animators of more modern Lupin productions. In my very first video on Lupin, I talked about how John Lasseter saw this film and became inspired to go into animation and filmmaking, later working at Pixar and revolutionizing the animation industry as a whole. He even had a strong relationship with Hayao Miyazaki himself, traveling to Japan and studying his animation approach. The dubbing for Castle of Cagliostro was also pretty interesting. The Japanese cast still had Yasuo Yamada as Lupin. However, the English dub went through several changes. All these separate voice casts I'll mention are all available on the 4K Ultra HD release of the film. Wow, a 4K release of a film in the late 70s? The fact that they restored this film that much gives you a good idea of just how meaningful this movie was for the Lupin franchise. Although, I'm personally not the biggest fan of how far they've restored this. I'm fine with the standard Blu-ray release. The colors on the 4K release look a bit darker than usual, but that could just be my monitor. So when it comes to English, there was a streamlined pictures dub from 1992 that featured Bob Bergen as Lupin. In that dub, they had to call Lupin Wolf, thanks to copyright issues. And then there was the Manga Entertainment dub from 2000, which had David Hayter as Lupin III. This is the definitive English dub, and my personal favorite. David Hayter would later go on to voice act Solid Snake in the Metal Gear Solid franchise. And the creator of that series, Hideo Kojima, created Solid Snake directly after watching Lupin III. So it kinda goes full circle.
That's a funny coincidence.
Also, if you wanted to watch a more kid-friendly version of the film, there's another audio track option that lets you see a toned down and kiddier version of the Manga Entertainment dub. You could definitely watch this film with your kid.
And this is actually how I got into the wacky and zany franchise of Lupin III, so perhaps I'm a bit biased. This was my first film I ever saw from Lupin III, and one of the very first animated films I ever saw as a kid. I may have liked it, but a lot of old-time fans at the time when this film was released actually didn't like this film at all.
They weren't pleased with Lupin's depiction, including the creator Monkey Punch himself. He disapproved how Miyazaki-san portrayed Lupin as a gallant hero instead of his original ruthless criminal self. He's more good than bad here, and while I appreciate the change, I kind of agree that Lupin's character is missing more of his greedy and villainous side. It's difficult to maintain that balance, something that earlier shows also messed up in my eyes. And only a few Lupin films and shows that I've seen do a really good job depicting Lupin as more of a morally gray person. People weren't happy with the heroic and selfless Lupin though. They also weren't happy with how friendly Jigen was as compared to before. They didn't like how lighthearted Goemon was, and most significantly, they didn't like the fact that Fujiko was not sexualized whatsoever. And Monkey Punch, while praising Castle of Cagliostro for being an excellent film, wasn't a fan of the vision set forth by Hayao Miyazaki's storytelling. He went on record stating, "I wouldn't have had him rescue the girl, I would have had him rape her."
Well, hold on just a second. This quote is not 100% confirmed to be said by Monkey Punch himself. It's just something I've seen floating around the internet for a while. What is known is that Monkey Punch was pleased with the film's performance, but he just wasn't a fan of this version of Lupin. This quote, if it's something he really said, would be in line with how he perceives the character, given how extensive he's used sexual humor and violence to depict Lupin in the manga. If this is the case, it does bother me to think that this could be the most likely reason as to why he didn't enjoy the film.
Did I forget to mention I'm a Disney Channel kid? Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, Wizards of Waverly Place, Kim Possible, Phineas and Ferb. Oh, I love watching other shows like Drake and Josh and Nickelodeon. I was a 2000s kid. I may have been predisposed to other mature-rated content as a kid, mostly accidental. Vulgarity that perhaps I probably shouldn't have seen. But maybe I speak for more people than myself when I say this. What the f? I don't understand that aspect of Lupin's character. I grew up with the belief that if you know someone who's a rapist, that's the lowest of the low. That's no good. You probably shouldn't revere and look up to that person out of respect, or even idolize to be like that person. Not that I idolize Lupin at all, that's not why I'm engrossed in his stories, but, well, This isn't exactly keeping my eyes glued for more. Sexual violence can be used as a potential plot device to characterize how dark someone has fallen or what kind of person they are. I'm not entirely against having that in films or shows. It can actually work pretty well in characterizing someone, but I always just found it out of place in Lupin, or rather what I envisioned Lupin to be. I know this is an important part to the character, and I know I already said this like 5 times before. It's just this one thing I'm really against. And given how his interpretation has easily changed over the years, I really see no need to keep that part consistent. It's distasteful and doesn't make me interested in watching him. Is it realistic? There are plenty of male characters that act as a gentleman spy / thief / criminal, defy the law, but they don't have to be rapists and hurt women. I'm not trying to turn this into a debate on how men like that don't exist, because they do. There are some really weird people in the world that do really bad stuff. But I'd rather Lupin be more busy in solving ways to steal and screw with people. The nudity and rape has no place for what I'd like to watch out of him. Yes, rape is a very sensitive topic nowadays, as it should be. And I think in certain situations you can use rape in fiction as a way to progress the story and or establish the tone for a darker narrative. I'm not a fan of Lupin going this route, because you're not supposed to take Lupin III seriously already, but incorporating something like this makes me take it very seriously, and the fact that the show treats it as such a joke is really unsettling. And Miyazaki-san thought the same as well. His interpretation of the character, although extremely tame in nature, at least indicates to the viewers that Lupin's the one thing that both police and villainous mob dealers and or other criminals fear, a powerful thief. The crux of who he is, what his job is in between the many shows and movies. This is what he's all about. He's got that mysterious intrigue, that picaresque styled layer of whimsical wittiness that helps make him a more layered and deep personality, harkening back to his James Bond and Arsène Lupin origins. I would be fine if he had all of that, with the darker tone. If they just took out the rape component out of all of this, it would be fine for me. He's a ladies' man. Miyazaki-san gets that right on the mark. But he's respectable in that he doesn't volunteer to rape every woman he sees in his sights. He's just a player. He's not a sex offender. It's hypocritical to argue this, I'll admit, since Lupin isn't someone you should be admiring in the first place. He's an intelligent, resourceful, and charismatic guy, but at the end of the day, he's a low-life criminal. Someone in real life you wouldn't want to be associating with. The reason I'm entertained by him is to see where his morally ambiguous life leads him. Watching people who aren't moral 100% of the time is interesting. But I guess I'm picky with how criminal-minded I want my protags to be when I'm watching them. I just can't accept the sexual assaults he's committed to in his past iterations. And although Miyazaki-san's interpretation is a bit too lighthearted to the point where it's almost not Lupin and just some generic thief, I could see how it could lead someone to think that this isn't Lupin. But that's not the case at all. I think Miyazaki-san paid perfect tribute to the character he reimagined back in the Green Jacket series. In an interview he did with the character designer from Part 1, Otsuka-san, he said, "The structure of Lupin is a very loose one. There is no unchangeable / untouchable image of Lupin III, which we are bound to. It can take anything. We can throw anything at it. It encompasses anything and everything." I felt that the popular image of Lupin was very close to the players / hustlers who would hang around in casinos. To me, that did not seem cool. It's unsophisticated / unrefined, and shows that they have no class. My image of Lupin is a mixture of French, noisy Italian, and shallow Japanese personality. So I hear that fans out there who are looking for dark, serious, and calculative mastermind Lupin were greatly disappointed by this film. That was due to the discrepancy of their image and ours, because I created Lupin to be nice and even admit he has weakness. That's a pretty interesting perspective. That whole players, casino, hustler thing that Hayao Miyazaki talked about, that interpretation is best seen in Part 2 and onwards with Lupin III. That's actually my more favorite, I guess. That's my personal depiction that I would like to see out of Lupin III. But despite that, I still enjoyed Hayao Miyazaki's film a lot, and I actually preferred that incarnation over other films that have used Lupin III over the years. I'm kind of happy that Hayao Miyazaki strived to maintain that tame, more heroic Lupin III, even if it kind of goes against his original conception. Anything to get away from the whole sexual side, it's not for me. Also, something else that I thought that was interesting that I didn't really mention in that interview was the age of Lupin III in Castle of Cagliostro was actually in his 40s, mid-40s, middle-aged.
I always thought from the animation alone when I was a kid, I thought he was like in his late 20s maybe mid-20s even. The character design doesn't really show that well in my opinion, but this is an older, wiser Lupin, according to Miyazaki-san. He's still into thievery, but he's not as flashy or brash. He's more simple, and his kindness and lighthearted personality is shown more. There is still some relevancy to the original Arsène Lupin, or actually, the main creator of that character I should say, Maurice Leblanc, as Miyazaki-san admitted in the same interview that he based the story of Castle of Cagliostro off of The Girl with Green Eyes, which was a book Maurice Leblanc himself wrote. He read the book when he was in middle school and used that to dictate his version of Lupin III, which was highly different from Monkey Punch's darker and vulgar version for the franchise, but nevertheless, something that's still an arguably rooted interpretation. I read the book while I was in middle school. I rented the book from a book rental store. I liked the book very much. I read it many times. I was always excited to see a beautiful girl in novels. My man, you've got some great taste. I can see where you got inspiration to draw Clarice. I know it's not a popular opinion amongst many Lupin fans out there, but I'm pleased she's not super sexualized and, honestly, just looks like a normal person who happens to be a princess. If you want something that's a bit more child-friendly and kinda almost celebrates Miyazaki-san's and Takahata-san's vision that they had for Lupin III at the end of Part 1, I would say this film is your best bet. Regardless if you even don't know anything about Lupin III, if you just want to watch one thing about Lupin III and be done with the franchise, this is a good watch. Man, I could keep talking about this movie all day, but we really gotta move on. This video is already really long. There are only 2 more things we're gonna look at today, but if you like anything you saw, just know that in the description below, I'll have a link for everything I can find that'll let you watch these episodes or movies. So you can check that out after you finish watching this. There was another production that had Miyazaki's vision for Lupin III. However, he was not involved with the animation like in Castle of Cagliostro. It was an OVA, so not as big as a traditional feature film, but longer than a normal anime episode, and it felt more like a one-shot. However, because of the character designs and story, there is a potential for this film being in the same universe as Castle of Cagliostro, but it's never been confirmed. Lupin III, the plot of the Fuma clan, or as it was later localized internationally as the Fuma Conspiracy, came out on December 18th, 1987. The plot goes like this. Goemon is getting married. His bride, Murasaki, was kidnapped by an evil organization known as the Fuma clan. They want their ransom payment to be some ancient vase, but it's an ancient custom that must never be given up, and so there's a moral struggle between giving up the vase or saving the girl between the girl's family. Damn, these guys are traditionalists. And Lupin just happens to sneak in, wanting the vase and all the treasures for himself. This film was known as Lupin III, the Fuma Conspiracy, in the English dub. Yeah, you heard me right. This was yet another attempt to avoid copyright, and a successful one at that. In the Japanese cast, however, there was a big controversy. I stated earlier that Yasuo Yamada, or Yamada-san I should say, voice acted Lupin. He was the voice actor. He cemented his role and made Lupin a very big name with his performance. However, he did not reprise his role in the film, and was replaced by someone else, Toshio Furukawa. Same thing happened with Jigen's iconic voice actor, Kiyoshi Kobayashi, as well as the rest of the original Japanese cast that worked on the majority of Lupin III productions. Because of budget concerns, the company that made this film, Tokyo Movie, or now known as Tokyo Movie Shinsa, TMS for short, decided to focus their money towards the animation. They wanted the animation to be the key center point of the film, but because of this budget issue, they didn't have enough money to pay the old cast and hired new actors who were cheaper and more flexible to work with, since this was only an OVA. OVA, or original video animation, are intended for a smaller number of viewers. They are mostly non-canon by nature in whatever show they come from, and aren't broadcasted either. They're made to be sold by video or DVD. So I guess in our modern era you could equate this to Devilman Crybaby on Netflix. Heavily gory, high levels of sexual violence, so you would never show this on TV, and because it's not on TV, it can't get censored by normal broadcasting standards, since it's on a streaming platform. However, that doesn't mean all OVAs are inherently violent or not for children. This OVA special for Lupin III happens to keep the same image of Castle of Cagliostro, as it was TMS's intention to try and get those audiences to watch this too. For whatever reason, they wanted the plot of the Fuma clan to be an OVA special, and because the budget differences between this and a feature film are so vast, they had to cut corners somewhere. So supposedly, the decision to have a more lesser, well-known and cheaper voice cast, as opposed to having the more popular Lupin III cast, really bothered Yasuo Yamada, and he took it up with Lupin III's original creator, Monkey Punch. But this wasn't up to Monkey Punch at all. Yasuo Yamada was really displeased that the studio had gone ahead and not hired him for this film. Voice acting is really serious in Japan, so I'm not too surprised that he was really pissed off about this. But apparently, this actually strained the relationship between Yasuo Yamada and Monkey Punch so much that they never even mended it well after Yasuo Yamada's death. Damn, that really sucks. They also couldn't afford to hire the same composer from Castle of Cagliostro, Yuji Ono. He became a series veteran and would continue to compose Lupin III music for several more decades, but we'll get more into him some other time. He's famous for composing the jazzy renditions of Lupin's theme, but in this OVA he got replaced by Kiyoshi Miura. Miura-san, interestingly enough, went to Berklee College of Music in Boston, which is pretty similar to some other composers that I've come to love. He made the music here more J-pop sounding, and although it's not the jazz Lupin is known to have, it still works and is lovely to hear. Yasuo Otsuka, the character designer from Part 1, was a supervisor for this film, and Miyazaki-san, although not officially working alongside him, had some of his cars included in the film for reference, and his animation style and quirks from Castle of Cagliostro was definitely taken in as a major influence for this OVA. Let me just stop myself right there. I keep using OVA and film interchangeably when discussing plot of the Fuma clan, and that's because TMS strangely decided to give this OVA a theatrical release, which is really unheard of for an OVA. I mean, that defeats the whole purpose of it being an original video animation, as I described earlier. This was done to recuperate the costs for the animation, as, despite their attempts to try to save money, they actually went insanely over budget. So there was a lot of drama and budget issues, but going past all of that, this film is actually pretty good. I liked it a lot. It felt like a blend between Eastern and Western cartoons, especially with some of the action. Telecom Animation Film, another company that worked alongside TMS, did work already for American cartoons. Thanks to the story being strictly centered in Japan, the production staff had an easier time researching and drawing locations and props. As I mentioned before, traditionalist Japanese attitudes were also incorporated between some of the characters, and it was a blast to see these people contrast with Lupin's picaresque character. We get to see Inspector Zenigata actually have a family here, something that's never talked about in 90% of any other Lupin show / movie / anything. So that was kind of interesting. Lupin and Jigen look so funny here. They look like Mario and Luigi kinda. This film really did get the Lupin cast really well. Like, their personalities just shine perfectly, just like in Castle of Cagliostro. Speaking about that film, there's also a lot of callbacks to that specific film that Miyazaki-san worked on, so it would be plausible to assume that these movies are both connected. They do look pretty similar, but then again, there is no concrete proof or statement that would solidify the case. The cigarette stubs here are very similar to a giant ashtray that was found in Castle of Cagliostro, in the Fiat. There was a rumor going around that they were both based on Hayao Miyazaki's own ashtray since he was a heavy smoker. Okay, I know I keep mentioning this, alright, hopefully this is the last time I mention this, but I'm happy that they adhered to Miyazaki-san's vision back in Castle of Cagliostro and his animation quirks and style, especially with women. They weren't drawn in crude and indecent ways. People like that stuff, I get it. I understand, I'm not attacking you, but I don't like that stuff, and I'm happy that this film presents Lupin III in that way. This special holds a distinction for also being one of the few pieces of Lupin media that's primarily centered around Goemon Ishikawa, since he doesn't take the spotlight too often. He's either in the background or just happens to join Lupin III on a mission to steal something. He really gets focused on here, and I love how the English dub makes sure to pronounce his name correct. The animation is beautiful, and despite this not being a major film, it definitely feels like one. The animators poured their heart and soul into this. It's a shame this film doesn't have any re-releases, besides a DVD. We don't have a Blu-ray for this yet, and it's actually kind of hard to find anything for this OVA at all. The 20th anniversary edition released on October of 2007. Discotek Media was releasing this, but unfortunately now it's entirely out of print. There was only a DVD release. There was never like a Blu-ray or a blown-out 4K release that Castle of Cagliostro got. So, yeah, that kind of sucks, but oh well. This film and Castle of Cagliostro are definitely my top 5 Lupin films I've ever seen. This film, as a result, is rather obscure and kind of hard to track down, so yeah, I'm thankful I can show you some footage, but it's really not in the best quality. There's just one more special to talk about in regards to the Green Jacket series. You remember Psychokinetic?
The guy in episode 2 of part 1 who could use fire and walk on air. You know, the guy who Lupin really struggled against back in the early days of the part 1 series? Well, he returns in another OVA special and is out to get Lupin again. This OVA special was titled Lupin III Return of the Magician, or also known as Lupin III The Living Magician. It came out on April 3rd, 2002. Yeah, we just made a big jump, but stay with me here. Or actually, you don't have to stay with me here. I don't know. It's almost decent, but it's pretty soulless and stale in comparison to the more lively films I just talked about previously. I know it's unfair to just not talk about this at all, since I gave a pretty fair and extensive assessment of the other Lupin movies, but I don't think you'll miss much if you skip this OVA. The story here is pretty weak, and the characters you watch aren't anything special. I don't feel anything intriguing or cool watching the Lupin cast here. It just feels like a cheap retrend of Part 1. We do get some nice callbacks to Part 1, back when things were violent and dark, as well as Fujiko's motorcycle, which is cool, I guess. But the actual film falls short of ever capturing the same spirit. The animation here, I mean, I'm no artist, I can't draw for shit, but there's nothing special. Nothing ugly, but nothing great. Just generic and bland enough to make me bored. And contrary to how I felt about the last OVA talked about, Plot of the Fuma clan, this special is near the bottom of my list as far as Lupin specials go. So if you skip this film, you're really not missing out on anything. Yeah. In the manga and early episodes of Lupin III Part 1, Lupin is psychotic and has a dark sense of humor. He has no problem murdering people to get what he wants. His relationships with people are more on business terms. He doesn't get too close to people too, except when he's robbing from their pockets and raping them out of glee and satisfaction, ignoring his victims' disapproval of his physical violations, all to get what he wants. He's more of an assassin who likes to screw with people. For an adaptation, they did a good job in bringing to life the manga. But the major downsides was that the majority of the viewers watching, now I'm not talking about the cult fanbase, but the majority of the people at the time did not appreciate the darker tone for the characters. And it wasn't until Lupin III became more comical and kid-friendly did people start to enjoy it. Since the later episodes of Part 1 onwards, and for most of the franchise, his personality changed significantly. While Lupin is a thief, he now goes to great lengths to fight against injustices of the world, almost like Robin Hood. While he sees nothing wrong with his chosen profession, he usually reminds the audience several times that there are worse people in the world than he is. He also fancies himself as a gentleman, someone who should stop and help people he deems are worth helping. And if they're pretty, he's more inclined to do so. But Lupin isn't afraid to stop stealing and focus on criminals engaged in more violent crimes, fighting them off and leaving them for Zenyatta to arrest, which gives him a more positive image. So in the hands of another writer, not necessarily a more competent one, but someone with a keen sense for how to attract a greater viewership to watch an adult-rated show, Lupin III Part 1 was able to succeed towards the tail end of the series. His motivations and morals fluctuated between the writers Monkey Punch, Masaki Osumi, Hayao Miyazaki, and Isao Takahata. Even with the Ghibli duo's involvement in reshaping who Lupin was, it was already too late to financially save Part 1. And thus they had to cancel the show prematurely. However, several years later, a new show would rise in the ashes of its tonally confused older brother. The Red Jacket series is the defining moment for when Lupin III fully changes into who he is, into this nice, smooth, jazzy criminal. But how? How does he do it? How does he go from this to this? Find out next time when we talk about Lupin III Part 2, or also known as the Red Jacket series. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I am very appreciative that you guys are watching this video and that you watched my past videos and gave them thousands of views. I am extremely thankful for that. Thank you so much, and stay tuned for next time when we talk about Part 2.
Alright, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Sorry about the video takedown, you know. TMS is pretty strict with copyright, and I kind of figured that would happen sometime. But oh well, you know, that's just life. Also, I want to thank the person who created the thumbnail art. The person who made the thumbnail art for this video is named Panda Jenn. This person really helped me make the thumbnail art. I'm really appreciative of their work. If you want to check out more work from this artist, I'll post some stuff in the description below. Alright, thanks for watching. Hopefully this video doesn't go down, and yeah, stay tuned for the next part in this 6. Oh yeah, it's gonna be 6 parts now because part 6 was announced. So yeah, I'll wait for that to fully air before going through an analysis of that. But yeah, thanks for watching this. Have a great day.